Welcome to the Everyday Rabbi. Today my guest is Jeff Berger, a long-standing prominent member of the Orlando Jewish community, an old friend, young friend, and close colleague, great conversationalist. Throughout the conversation we'll talk on different subjects about life and about happiness and about service to others. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Looking forward.
Yeah. All right.
How are you?
I'm fine, Lamik. How are you?
Dude, thank God. Where do we begin? We know each other for how long? Let's start with that.
I started with your dad in 1992.
92.
So when were you born?
I was 6 years before that.
Yeah, so you were a baby.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I have a memory, you were 9, and your dad asked us over to the sukkah.
Okay.
And he had you stand up and give a Devar Torah.
Yes.
In the sukkah when you were 9.
Yeah, that's how I learned how to be put on the spot.
Yeah.
Because at 9 years old, it wasn't the first time 9, but since at least 9, my dad would pick on me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so, say something.
Now, 20, 30 years later, you're still standing up giving Devar Torahs in the sukkah?
I guess. I was taught well.
So I've known you a long time.
So the topic, the discussion, we always revolve around. Tell me a little bit about it. You always seem to touch on the same subjects: joy and happiness and equilibrium, the theory of everything. So let's jump right in.
All right. So you know that I was not born into Chassidus. I came from a secular background. And when I started adulting and learning how to do or be an adult and trying to figure out how to find some equilibrium in my adult life, I explored, a secular life, or we went to Reform Judaism for a while, a academic life, and finally I met your dad, and I think it was either 90 or 92, but we're early on, and it made sense to me. It had so coming from a secular background, I was always the reinforcing of whether or not I found a truth was that it was a logic-based rationale rather than a completely faith-based explanation for why something should have meaning or give you balance. Right. What's a book that we used to look at? It was the White Book, where the guy actually goes ahead and gives the proof for...
Was it The Pillars of Faith?
Yes.
By Pinchas Taylor? Yes.
Pinchas Taylor. So that was like one of my instrumental or foundational sort of... It was way after the kids were born and all, I bought into everything, but that's an example of how intellect and logic, which were creations of God, not proofs of not God, reinforce it, the path that I had set down. So anyway, I had sort of, coming from a intellectual background, was always intrigued by string theory, or the theory of everything. And I thought, in the pursuit of this equilibrium that you should feel in life when you get up and raise your kids or go to work or do whatever you do during the day, that there should be a string theory. There should be a unifying theory of everything, one singular thought or notion that was foundational. So you didn't have to go through 42 different steps to feel normal, when you woke up in the morning, that you could just think, all right, I'm back at it. And so you and I have been talking about that for
30 years?
all these many years.
Yeah. So I think that this, it's interesting you call it, the theory of everything, because, let's start with this. What is, it all comes down to Chassidus, right? It all comes down to this.
It turns out for me, for what I have explored, Chassidus it has truths in it to me that cannot be contradicted or refuted, or but the truth is a truth, right? So Chassidus, to me, it brings truths to, what I call life and how to live it. Right. So the Dawkins or the Hitchens or, these guys, when they find their truths in, intellectualism, atheism, or whatever, there's no truths that they are pursuing. There's only, the next scientific, whatever. And I'm a science guy. Mm-hmm. But the very definition of science is that you pursue science to make the science that you know obsolete.
Right. So, I mean, in the classic, nomenclature of this dichotomy between science and Judaism, Judaism is the truth, and science is the pursuit of finding the truth, and they're both valid as within their own ecosystems, within their own.
Yeah. So I want to caution you and say that, I wouldn't constrain truths to being only Jewish.
Sure.
Right? You know what I mean? Right. Like, God made the whole mishpacha. He made the Catholics and the Islam.
Truth is not Judaism, but Judaism is truth.
Right. I wouldn't get distracted on that, but I'm talking about truths. I'm talking about a meaningful life of equilibrium is a connection to the people you love, adding meaning to their life, and them adding value to yours. That's a truth.
Right. And speaking of which, you just showed me a couple minutes ago that you have some friends who are not Jewish, who are sharing with you these ideas and these concepts and these.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
How does that happen?
How does what happen?
How does a rabbi out of Minnesota, who you and I both know, who probably didn't get much airtime outside of the Chabad Jewish community, let alone the general Jewish community, maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Whoever watches this, forgive me, but he's not the most dynamic speaker. But he says powerful things, but
yes, there are many.
His affect is to be very low key.
Right, but in the sense that
has turned that into a giant voice.
Right, and now it's with all the social media and promulgation of knowledge, stuff like this could be anywhere. And to the sense that you have your friend who probably never met this man,
practicing Catholic,
religious, who is intrigued by things that a rabbi has to say.
I wouldn't say intrigued. I would go back to what we were just talking about before, which is a truth resonates. Whether you're a Buddhist, a Catholic, a Jew, or
right.
So happens that my experience is Chassidus distills or focuses or illuminates truth more poignantly, more succinctly, more easily adaptable. I don't know the word I'm thinking of, but integratable. I made that word up into your own life, right? You think what's the use of having a truth if you can't integrate it into how you live?
Right. So what's interesting is that my experience, so you have your experience of Chassidus in the sense that you grew up in a more secular Jewish background, found it through your own journey.
Mm.
And in a certain sense, I'm in the same boat because maybe the only difference is I grew up with it, but I was still finding it, because you can't just own things that you You have to sort of experience it.
Yeah.
You have to find it within your own life. And there are many people who grew up with it who don't find it, because you could grow up with something and completely ignore it and not take it for granted and never think about it and so on. So in my experience growing up, it was always interesting that there are, of course, Hasidic stories and Hasidic ideas and Hasidic teachings, but if you think about it, what they all come down to is fundamental truths, like you said. And what I found is that rarely does Hasidus say something completely original. What it's doing is it's saying what everyone else said, just maybe not spelled out. So what it does is it says, you remember you learned this Midrash and this Talmud and this verse in Torah and this Zohar and this, this idea, and you heard these stories and so on, and this Judaism and this practice. What if you put it together like this? And it shows you a construct with all the ingredients that you already have. And it's a whole new idea. It's a whole new appreciation for
I'll tell you
life.
something interesting, which is, through the history of the world, the skill, art, talent of storytelling has been how human progress has been made and measured.
Right.
Right?
100%.
And so now we have...
And we discount it as hyperbole and as narrative, and it's just a story. But those are the most powerful things
This
that
is
underlie
how we
everything.
learn.
Right.
This is how people learn. And so now we have, in the most poignant, secular example, last Tuesday, that we learned we have evolved in the last 4 years, 8 years, 10 years on how to tell stories and how to influence people's behaviors through just what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Through this.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so we're living in the most interesting times where storytelling has evolved to another form, probably a more powerful form than there has ever been, with the exception of Jewish storytelling and Chassidus and the Talmud and I don't even know the names of the different places you learn stuff. Zohar.
You can have another class on that.
Right?
Right.
And so we find that Chassidus and Judaism is once again, 3,000 years old, and in the future we're discovering it's the next best thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And has that tie-in, from your perspective, has that tie-in to everyday life? Because on the Everyday Rabbi and in everyday Judaism, our focus is always to bring it into practice, to bring it into effect. And how does that, in other words, it starts from a very philosophical place.
Yeah.
It goes through the world of narrative and the world of storytelling and the world of emotion, and then it has to come into action. So how have you seen that practically in your life?
So it's a good question, and I'd been at it since the early 90s and looking for something that made sense to me for many years, and is, more recently than I just heard something. So I had, this, before there was YouTube, there was the audio classes.
Yes.
And I started out listening to the rabbis and the audio classes, and then on the YouTube, and then on finally the rabbis had their podcasts. Mm-hmm. And
the rabbis just uploaded all their stuff to YouTube.
No, because it's all
I'm saying
new.
A lot of the stuff is more
content.
modern, but if you look, there's stuff from
it's
30,
all
40
true.
years ago.
It's all true. Because, it's all wisdom that's 3,500 years old anyway,
Sure.
right? So there was an enormous accumulation of data that I went through, and I learned different things. There was a period of time where I thought inspiration was the most important thing, and then I thought Action, taking activities, just doing action was the most important thing. And so I had all this foundational sort of Hasidic philosophies going on. And then I was just in shul on a Saturday. So I'll just back up and tell you, once again, when you endeavor to take the biggest bite out of life that you can, which we're meant to do, right? God has given us all these gifts and blessings, and we're meant to maximize them and utilize them and all the rest. It's a very, very complicated existence that you have to negotiate, a mortgage payment and car payments and dental and braces and bikes and school. And you have, I have 4 kids, so all 4 lives of that. And then I have a marriage I have to negotiate. And then all my personal relationships in the shul. And then I own my own business. So then, it's a very complicated thing. And then the business is all, is the engine that runs the family. Very, very complicated, 4-dimensional, multi-level, intertwined existence, right? And so when you wake up in the morning and you have your first sort of cognitive thoughts are, crap. I got 97 things that I've got to sort of equalize here before my first foot hits the floor. And, just saying Modiani doesn't get you there.
That's the first step.
What's a single thought? What's the least I can do to get myself ready to go attack that? And you're meant to go attack it. And it's good to go attack it. And the paradox is that the more complicated it is, the better it is. And so this was what I was after. What I call the theory of everything, the one word, the one prayer, the one thought, the one notion that would automatically center me before the first foot hit the floor. And I had thought that the notion of happiness is a false pursuit. Happiness.
Isn't that why it's called a pursuit? Because you never get there. It's always...
Well, that's the point, right? Right. And so, I'm happy if I have a good meal, or if I'm satisfied with my car, or if my son, any of the kids, performs well in school or extracurricular activities. But as soon as that's done, I'm, back to like, holy crap, I got to pay the mortgage, right? And so that's, the dread of that. So it wasn't happiness that I was after. So I was in shul one day, and I don't know, you tell me which parsha talks about doing mitzvahs with joy.
Probably, I can think of 2.
Okay.
There's the one where it's a bunch of negative things that happen to the Jewish people if they don't serve God with joy. I think that's the one.
Right. So
which is the irony of ironies, is that it's not in just doing what you have to do, it's doing it joyfully.
That's a point.
Right.
And so I'm sitting in shul, and
that's like Chassidus in a nutshell also.
Well, and like I say, you could, teach or show a 6-year-old an algebra equation, and it won't mean anything to him until he's 17. So I had been, trying to get there, so that finally when I heard that parsha, and the rabbi said, God has commanded us, not wants us, not recommends, he has commanded us to do his mitzvahs in joy, with joy. And he has also commanded that we are meant to be doing mitzvahs all the time. And so if you take the algebra of that, it means we are meant to be joyous all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And so that hit me between the the forehead, like, that's it. And there's two components of that. One is, you go back to a story that happened to me when my oldest son was little. We used to say the Shema. When you're supposed to say the Shema before you go to bed. So I'm putting the kids to bed. Okay, Joe, it's time to say the Shema. Shema Israel. Okay, good night. And one night, he's going to bed. And I'm not saying the Shema tonight, Dad. I said, what? He says, I don't want to say the Shema tonight. I said, you got to say the Shema. He says, why do I got to say the Shema? I said, well, it's Friday night. We're going to ask the rabbi tomorrow why you got to say the Shema. So we go, shul on Saturday morning, walk right up to the rabbi. Joe, tell your question to the rabbi. Rabbi, why do I have to say the Shema tonight? And without missing like a nanosecond, he looks at me and goes, oh, the Torah tells you so. And so as a parent, a very important lesson. As a child, the idea because I told you so was antithetical to life on planet Earth. Your parents said, why do I got to do that, Mom? Because I said so. Well, that was a commandment to do the opposite, right? But when he said that, it's foundational in our observance. Some things we do because God said so. And so now you come back to many years later, me trying to figure out how to get out of bed in the morning. Because I told you so is foundational to my understanding of my observance.
Mm-hmm. And then we could understand. So that's the first level to understanding also, is being able to follow and being able to trust someone that you know is trustable.
I call it submit or subjugate. Mm-hmm. But yes. And this is my favorite thing about Chassidus, is it really only is the explanation and negotiation of paradoxes. But you subjugate without giving up your inherent that you don't give up your free will and your
identity and
So there's your autonomy.
Right.
Your
There's
autonomy.
two things about this that I always
hang on. Like I said, keep your thought, but let me just finish, which is, so for me, the idea of you're commanded to be joyous all the time. That was the light bulb. So then it was nothing more than figuring out personally for me what's the definition of joy. And so I have figured out in my own life the times that I truly felt joy, the birth of my children, when you feel you can't define it, but when you feel joy,
is it a sense of accomplishment, a sense of
you've
done the work?
For me, when I had thought back and thought of the times that I felt joy, what was I feeling at the time? And it was three things. One, it was a humility to realize that I've been blessed. I'd been, you pick what you like, lucky, blessed, whatever. The gratitude that God had chosen me to receive it, and that my role in it was to be of service. So for me, the way I define joy is the perspective of gratitude, service, and humility. And if I'm feeling those three things, or any one of those things, then I can feel the joy. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm, fretting a car payment or a client or a particular thing I have to do that day on the job, and I can think to myself, you're there to serve the people that you're dreading. You should be feeling humble that you have the opportunity, and have the gratitude that you've been given, the blessings that you already have, with my health of my children and all that, I can process all that before my foot hits the floor. And so that's a long, long answer to how do I use that in my life?
Yeah.
That equilibrium to go out and fight the fight during the day.
So there's two things that I always remember, growing up together.
Yeah.
A little older than I am. But
A lot older.
I remember both getting older by the day. But one thing I remember is that I don't know if it was this story with Joe, but there was a question that one of your kids had to ask the rabbi, and I think it was a question you asked the rabbi. And you went to my father and you said, "How do I give over my Judaism to my kids?" And my father said, "It's not your Judaism; it's their Judaism. Let them experience and explore and understand." And so when you brought Joe to my dad and said, "Hey, you ask him. Hey, it's not my problem. It's your problem.
Yeah.
You go fix your own problem." That was one thing. The second thing I remember is that it might be somewhat unrelated, but I think it's funny. It's connected to the idea of self-identity and free will and
autonomy.
Autonomy is that it was a kiddush, and you were saying how Chabad is either the truth or the most successful cult in history. And I think we know which one it is. And I think that for me, and I went on my own journey of finding out and exploring and learning and deducing and rebutting and so on. But I think that what is amazing about the lifestyle and the construct that we have is, number one, the questions are never off limits. And I don't know if that's something that people need to hear, but there's this stigma somewhere, I don't know where it came from, that either questions are not allowed or questions are not answered.
Well, I can tell you where it came from.
Where did it come from?
Centuries of orthodoxy, being cruel to children that question the orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And
because they didn't know.
Obedience was valued over autonomy, free will, buy-in, whatever you want.
As if, God forbid, somebody actually has free will. What would they do then?
Well, the ironic thing about it is that it's a stunning rebuke of what I don't know, it's just a Hasidic daughter of the Rabbi said it, but and it again in this book, Pillars of Faith, which is Judaism does not fear a question of a fossil or a Higgs boson, or because we know for sure that there's a God of the universe. And if he is omnipotent, omniscient, one of the O words, I forget what they are, right? Then for sure he created the Higgs boson. For sure, that's what God is. It's all powerful, all knowing, all everything, time, past, present, future, the whole thing. So he for sure created the dinosaur bones. For sure he created the Higgs boson. And if it's not been revealed, what's the answer to why that all exists? That's not his fault. It's, it hasn't been revealed yet.
So in other words, if God created the world, then it's our job to find the answers. And by the way, I always say, if you ask a rabbi and the rabbi doesn't know the answers, go find another rabbi who knows the answers, because there's got to be answers. And it's interesting because growing up in a family or in a community where there's always answers, you sort of become
But it's more
complacent.
than that. It's that the answers reinforce, prove, or otherwise confirm the notion that there was a creator, right? It's not, there's no answer that says, this disproves that guy. There's no guy up there with a gray beard, right?
Right.
There's all of the answers.
There's that story of Manas Friedman. This is way back in the day in Minnesota, and he's giving this lecture to a bunch of college students, mostly women. And there's this one girl who's very quiet the entire time, and he realizes, she has something to say. So he turns to her and says, "Listen, if you have any questions, you're allowed to ask." So she says, "I don't want to ruin it for everybody." So Mana says, I need to hear this answer. Like, what question is so, burning that you need to? So she says, you asked for it. She says, who created God? So the rabbi says, it's all over. 3,300 years of history just collapses in on itself. He says, do you think that in thousands of years, in all the thousands, tens of thousands of books, hundreds of thousands of rabbis, that there hasn't been one person who asked this question? We've asked the question, there's books on the question, there's answers, there's questions to the answer, there's answers to those questions. We've said, we discuss, relax, you don't have an original question. And I think that growing up in yeshiva, it was very comforting when I heard that for the first time.
Yeah.
That your question is probably not going to be the first time that question was asked. And I'm not going to say it's a stupid question, but chances are it's not as groundbreaking as you might think it is. We've discussed it. It's and I think that, for me growing up in my family, right, with a Jewish background, a very Jewish background, Chabad Hasidic Jewish background, it was. I was always surprised by where the information came from, because I always knew there was information. See, I came from the opposite side. I always heard the answers, but I never heard the questions. So for me to discover the questions behind the answers, that's what this answers, or that's what this issue, takes care of, because I came from the other side. I came from, behind stage. I saw all the props, and I didn't know what the props were for. And then you see the show, and like, okay, this starts to make sense. So it's a very interesting, dichotomy that, we have this journey, we have this free will, we have this intrigue, we have these questions. And unfortunately for many people, that's where it stops. And they say, well, there must not be any answers, or the answer's not very good, or I don't like the answers, which is another possibility. And then you're exposed, you're introduced to an environment, or a mindset, I would call it. Chassidus is a mindset. And all of a sudden things start to synthesize, they start to come together. Things that you never thought could ever come together, two opinions that are as diametrically opposed as they possibly can be. And suddenly the Rebbe is like, this is the same thing.
The thing is, I've said this to you before, is that if you're the person you're talking about a self-aware person who is trying to actualize and is on a journey of self-improvement or whatever. There's plenty of people who are not on that path, and they observe some things and they don't observe the other things, and when it doesn't work out, they complain about how their prayers didn't work and it's all BS, and it's a big scheme to sell Bibles or whatever. I don't know. But for a person who is actually trying to live an aware, connected life and actualize, there's no getting around the point that you have to make a decision where there's no turning back, and you cannot revisit that decision. And
it's the red pill, blue pill, no?
And I say it like this when I'm talk to my kids about it, or having a discussion with friends or whatever. But we're given two choices, and there's only two. One is that 1,000,000 billion zillion years ago, two particles that are too small to be measured and only exist theoretically, randomly collided in the universe at such a speed that when they collided, they instantaneously created the galaxies. And 6 billion years later, we have a peacock. Now, that's one possibility. The other possibility, now this possibility is not conceivable to me. I cannot, my mind, and I don't believe the human mind, can possibly conceive that construct. That from that the way the statisticians, they now have a new way of quantifying things. There's a non-zero probability, right? So that's a non-zero probability event, okay? How that could relate to anglerfish, peacocks, nuclear weapon, all of that just on luck and evolution. The second possibility is that 2,400 years ago, some guy with a gray beard and a crooked stick sat on top of a mountain, banged it, and the sea split. Now, this is also a notion and a concept that my brain cannot comprehend, the super rational, supernatural nature of some of the stories that we have. They're not comprehensible. But we have this decision point. One comes with random existence and the notion of self-control, and one comes with a playbook of connection, love, meaning, value,
humility, gratitude,
and joy, right? So I tell my kids, choose wisely. You can go either way. And so you have to come to that one decision point. And then once you come to that point and you choose one way or the other, then you can say, okay, I'm going to take this bit on faith. This comes with the Moses story, and I'm going to assume that just because my mind can't conceive it doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah, I think there's also another dynamic to that, which is when something is true and it does make sense, it does reason that something else would be true and would make sense. So if you're on page 2 of Talmud, because there's no page 1, right? So if you're on page 2 of Talmud and you understand page 2, and then you're on page 3 of Talmud and you have not yet even opened up page 3, you understand that there's a good chance that page 3 will make as much sense as page 2. And if it doesn't, by the way, you'll say, I probably don't understand page 3. Because page 2 is brilliant. Page 3, I'm not getting. So what am I missing, right? And the fact that there was, I think, 7,500 pages, and they've been studied for, 1,800 years, 1,500 years. There's probably something here. There's probably what to discuss. The fact that all the rabbis study it and all the churches tried to burn it, and there must be something interesting in this book. It can't be that I'm just not getting it, right? It can't be there's nothing here. And I think that's true in general in life, is that, when you bump into issue after issue, inconsistency after inconsistency, without any resolve, that becomes a problematic system. Whereas when you find that over the course of time, over the course of persistence, you'll get the answers you're looking for if you just look hard enough and you look in the right places. It's a very reassuring thing, even if you don't understand it. Even if I don't understand how, Moses split the sea or how God created the world. Definitely not how 2 random atoms will, make all
They're
this.
They're not even atoms. I think they're even smaller than that.
But I think that
atoms are first giant compared to what these things are.
Yes. So, but what it all comes down to is it's not about faith. It's more about trust, because you know something. The example I like giving is the GPS, right? So nobody trusts the GPS. Nobody has faith in the GPS. There's no church of the GPS. But somehow everybody follows it on a regular basis. And the reason why most people follow it is because it's understandable, it's rational that the GPS might have a little bit more information about what's going on the roads than you currently have right now. And when it says make a left, when you think you should make a right, and you say, I don't understand, it doesn't really make any sense. And then 2 minutes later, when you hit dead end traffic, you realize why it makes sense in the first place. So then...
I'll add one other thing to your GPS metaphor.
Sure.
It works 100% of the time.
It
always gets you to where it tells you it's going to get to go.
More or less,
Not more or less. And that's take you right to the front door.
GPS is man-made technology, so GPS.
I'm just saying, if your metaphor of Torah and Chassidus or whatever is GPS,
right.
It works 100% of the time.
You're saying the metaphor doesn't fit the analog, which is that in real life this works all the time.
This works all the time.
Yeah, it's a.
So to make a full circle, the everyday rabbi.
And the theory of everything.
And one is be a committed person to self-awareness, actualization, and autonomy. And then 2, do what you're told. Right?
In a good way.
Do what you're told.
Yeah.
Be joyous and do the mitzvahs.
Because it works.
And
Helps
and then, so that's the way it was for me, and I don't, when I say do what you're told, I drive my car to synagogue on Shabbos and a whole bunch of other things. What I mean is live a joyous life, and what will flow out of that is the meaning and connection and equilibrium in that we all sort of seek this calm mind to get us through what's referred to on Shabbos as the mundane.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's very exciting, very dynamic, very.
It's also step by step, and the step by step doesn't require drastic overnight growth like most things in life don't require, and or might not even benefit from. Right? Too fast growth is sometimes more detrimental than stability. But one thing I always admire about you and your family is, you know, the Kohen Aliyah is very well attended, and regardless of which, whether they're wearing their talis or baseball, outfits, the fact that, you're there and you show up, and it was always something for me growing up. Like here's a family who really values their heritage, really values their connection to Judaism, values their aliyah. You gotta be there in time, you gotta show up. And you take turns at bat, whoever's week it is.
Well, the other story, or the other answer to the story you told about when I asked your dad how we gift, how we teach, how we transmit, how we pass on the Judaism is, and this has been true. One of my first lessons I learned from as being a parent, the answer is, my children have never learned anything from me they didn't watch me do.
Mm-hmm.
I could talk all day long about it. And again, my son Joe, we were 4, 5, or 6 years old. He was in the YMCA soccer league. The YMCA, the soccer is 9, 10, and 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings. So 9 o'clock in the morning, we're in the car and we're on the way to the soccer game. Joe's like, "Hey, Dad, where are we going?" "Soccer, you got a soccer game, 9 o'clock. He says, "Isn't it Saturday?" I said, "Yeah, Saturday." He says, "It's Shabbos." It's my 5-year-old boy. "Shabbos." I said, "That's right." He says, "Oh, I get it. Soccer's more important than Shabbos." And that was the last time that we didn't do something or didn't not go to synagogue on a Saturday.
So we teach our kids teach us, right?
So my 5-year-old. Now, the kids all played sports and had extracurriculars on, every weekend. So if their ball games were at 9, they would be over at 11. They'd be to synagogue by 11:30 for the end of synagogue and the Kiddush. If the games were at 11, they were the early part of the service. But there was always Shabbos. There was always an observance, at least on Shabbos. And when you say that you see us there,
they say there's a saying: more than the Jews keep Shabbos, Shabbos keeps the Jews.
Yeah, well,
so
the 4 burger kids kept me in that synagogue because they never learned anything from me. They didn't watch me do. So I went.
Very nice.
And now they go. And my youngest, who's 20 now, this weekend is going on a Shabbaton for college kids in New York.
Pagisha, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Full circle.
Because they do. They do.
So I think we'll wrap up here just for today. To be continued. There's so much to discuss, and so many roads to go down. But in summation, I think that what gives us joy and what gives us happiness on a daily basis,
gratitude and
humility, gratitude, and
service.
And humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And gratitude is appreciating the things you have, right? Like the things you have, then you'll have the things you like. And service.
Also, and there's a bit of subjugation in that. There's a bit of submission in that, to realize gratitude is that I don't have this beautiful house and this beautiful car and my status in my community, and because of my hard work and everything I did. And it's because there's a divine intervention. These were blessings that were given to me.
You were given the talents and you were given the abilities to do all those things.
Exactly.
And then finally...
And then my part,
which is service.
Is to utilize all the talents and blessings that I've been given to me.
Right. And that's a service. That's
my service is only to people. I look at the people and leave my ego out of it and say, how can I be of service to you today? And that's as straightforward as it gets.
That's, I think, the most important mitzvah in the Torah, right?
It's certainly the most gratifying. And, by the way, if you're looking for proof of concept, proof that there's a God, it's counterintuitive. It's counter-Darwinian to think that the service of other people is the best feeling that you get on planet Earth. Because if we were back on the Galapagos Islands, fighting for food or shelter or survival, right? Serving other people is counterintuitive to your own.
That's your downfall. That's your antithesis, right? So
anyway, that'll be another subject for another day.
100%. And then there's one more thought I had about service and about helping others. That the whole fundamental, the core of Judaism, right? The famous story that the man went to Rabbi Akiva famously told his students that love your fellow Jew, right? This is the entire Torah.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, how could this be the entire Torah? And the simple answer is, if you could serve someone else, if you can give somebody else, if you could do for somebody else, love someone else, then the rest of the Torah is easy. If you can't let go of your own ego and your own selfishness, the rest of the Torah is going to be a little complicated.
Right.
So it's a good place to wrap up. But
thank
you for your time.
Thanks for asking me.
We'll
told you at the beginning of this, I'm my own favorite subject. So get me to talk about me and my kids for 45 minutes is easy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for watching this awesome episode of the Everyday Rabbi. More to come. Subscribe, like, contribute, be a part, come on the podcast, and God willing to many, many more.